Okay, the last part of the exposure triangle is speed. It's shutter speed. There's a shutter in front of your sensor that is light tight, meaning it's not letting any light through. Okay. And that shutter will open and close either really fast or really slow, depending on these settings, to let in a certain dosage of light. So it can open for 1 full second. It's going to let in a lot of light. Again, with the faucet analogy, if you opened your faucet for 1 second, it's going to let out a certain amount of water. So if I open the shutter for 1 second, it's going to allow a certain amount of light to go in. If you were fast enough to turn your faucet on and off within 1/30th of a second, it's going to let in less water. Just like if that shutter opens and closes inside 1/30th of a second, it's only going to let in a small amount of light. It's going to let in less and less because you can do 1/3000th of a second. Or 3 full seconds. It's going to let in more light. It's a little bright. So for this image, the shutter is going to open and close in 1/15th of a second. If I slowed it up to 1/4 second, it's going to let in more light. If I slowed it down to 1/60th of a second, it allows less light in. Let's compare these images. Same ISO, 800, sorry, ISO 800, ISO 800. Where's the rest of my information here? Okay. ISO 800, ISO 800. F-stop of 4, f-stop of 4. The only thing that changed was the shutter speed. Shutter was open for 1/15th of a second, and we got a good exposure. Shutter was open for 1/4 of a second, so open for longer, and we got too much light. Yeah, too much is the red exposure meter. That means too much light. Again, ISO 800, an aperture of f-stop of f4. Over here on the right, ISO 800, f-stop of 4, f4. The only difference, this shutter was open for 1/60th of a second, and this shutter was open for 1/15th of a second. So less light, shorter time, less light, longer time, more light. Even longer time, even more light. So we're trying to balance these three variables. And juggling three variables can be difficult, which is why we set the ISO first to a reasonable range, and then we can forget about it and worry about the f-stop and the shutter speed. If we're still not figuring it out with the f-stop and the shutter speed, then we'll go back and reinvestigate the ISO. But inside, if you set an ISO of 800, you'll be fine. Outside in bright daylight, set an ISO of 100 or 200, you should be fine.